So there's a couple making $260,000 a year, but they're living paycheck to paycheck, and they can't figure out where the money goes. They can't stop the cycle. They've been married for several years. And when someone finally sat them down and asked, what do they want out of life? Their answer legit challenged me. All right, let me show you.
It feels like we are living paycheck to paycheck, and it stresses me because we just have the money we have and then we wait for payday and we do it all over again.
So that's $260,000 a year, low rent, double income. They're describing their life like they're barely surviving. Now, most people hear that and think, how is that possible? Where's the money going? And that's exactly where the interviewer goes. He digs into the numbers, the insurance, the car payment, the spending. But what caught me wasn't the spreadsheet information. It was what the husband said when he was asked a simple question. What is your dream life?
Ramit, you also have to understand that for the first few years of our marriage, we weren't allowed to have dreams. We were brought up in a culture where it was all about the church and the family, and that was it. You weren't allowed to have dreams outside. You weren't allowed to go anywhere. You weren't allowed to travel. You weren't allowed to think of leaving. So what sounds like basic small dreams, it's everything we've dreamed of for our entire life. And we're content with that.
We weren't allowed to have dreams. Sit with that for a second. This isn't a couple who was bad with money. This is a couple who was never allowed to imagine what money could be for them. His entire paycheck went to his family and the church for years, and her money too. They didn't have their own finances. They didn't actually have their own life. So when they finally got free, they didn't know how to dream. Not because they lacked imagination, but because dreaming had been punished out of them. A house with space for their kids and a vacation once a year. That's not a small dream. That's the first dream they were ever allowed to have. And that right there is the most financial, that's the thing that most financial advice completely misses.
It's like the second you get a dollar, it's, oh my God, it's a dollar. Oh, what can we do with this dollar? And it's that $1 brought us joy, but then it was this fleeting.
That dollar brought us joy, but it was fleeting. That one line tells you everything. Nobody taught them that money could build something. Nobody showed them that a dollar could be patient and didn't have to be spent immediately. The only thing they ever learned that was money comes in and money goes out, and you better get what you can while it's here. So they kept chasing that first feeling, that relief, the moment, week over week, not because they were irresponsible, but because that was the only thing they had ever been taught about money in their entire lives. Temporary relief from a situation that never felt safe. And this is what I want you to hear, because this isn't just their story. This is a story of most people. When they grew up, they heard money, and that meant chaos. Money meant arguments. Money meant some type of control. And you don't just inherit your parents' debt. You inherit their feelings about money. And those feelings run you until you actually stop and name them.
So where would it come from?
More hours at work.
You grew up poor?
Actually, yes.
It's a common thing for people who grew up poor. Their answer is, if something doesn't work with my money, just grind it out, especially for men.
Before we had Jay, that's all I used to do. I used to be the breadwinner in the family, but I would never be home. When we got married, I saw my wife for like 4 hours per day. And that was because she was sleeping, and I'd come home, take a shower, and go right back to work.
So as he said, he grew up poor, and the only thing poverty taught him about money was grind, work more, don't stop. He used to see his wife 4 hours a day while she was sleeping, and that was his normal. And now he's making $260,000 a year, and his first answer to any problem that there might be a lack of money is still work more hours. Bro, the emergency is over, but his nervous system doesn't understand that yet. And the interviewer does a good job here. He fixes numbers, he gets them to cancel the bad insurance and all the practical stuff. But then 6 weeks later, the couple is actually different, and that's real. But here's what I keep thinking about. He asked them at the end, what stories did you used to tell yourselves? And they said, we're poor and we can't afford it. And nothing about their income had changed, just the story. That's the part that matters most. And that's the part a budget can't touch.
Guilt-free spending part, I think, is what hasn't clicked for me, because I feel guilty about spending anything. I don't know what I would do with a guilt-free spending budget, if I'm being honest. I love Russian manicures, but a Russian manicure and a Russian pedicure will often run you about $200 and that's without tip. So I do not do Russian manicures and pedicures.
How often does one get a manicure?
Every
pedicure?
3 to 4 weeks.
So let's just say once a month for easy math. $200 plus tip, $250. Is that possible?
She's making almost over a quarter million dollars a year, but she feels guilty about spending $250 on herself. Not because she can't afford it, but because, again, no one ever showed her that she was allowed to spend money on herself. And when the interviewer asked her, what would her son learn about how to treat a woman? He learned that moms spend money on everyone except themselves. And that same lesson she learned, she was in the process of passing it down to her son without even saying a word. And that's how money stories work. They don't get taught to in a classroom. No one sits us down. They get absorbed in a kitchen, at a dinner table, in the silence after an argument about bills. At TalkSense, we start there. Not with spreadsheets, but with the story underneath. Because you can fix every number on the page and the story will still be running until you hear it, until you name it, until you decide it doesn't get to write the next chapter of my life. You don't just inherit your parents' debt, you inherit their fear, and the work. The real work is learning that their story doesn't have to be yours. Talk first, tools later.
Talk sense.